Welcome to the Physique Blueprint podcast for women building strong, sculpted hourglass physique, the stage being optional. I'm your host, Chelsea Kidd, coach and founder of Physique Blueprint. Let's dive in.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I'm Chelsea Kidd, your host, and today I'm going to be talking about diet compliance, managing hunger, cravings, touching a little bit on emotional eating and mindless eating. All of this is meant to help people who are in a diet phase, fat loss phase, mini cut, or possibly in the mock prep challenge or in an actual competition prep. So there's a lot of times in our life that we may be trying to lose a couple pounds and just really struggling with the impacts of hunger holding us back from our goals. And there are some tips and tricks that you can put into place. But first and foremost, I'm going to try to briefly recap what I talked about in the last couple episodes. I feel like we've gone over this of like setting yourself up for success going into a competition prep. Uh, Brief recap. And I wrote a blog article on this. So if you want a deeper dive and some additional resources, head over to www.teampb.fit. Um, Going into a prep or going into a fat loss phase, very important to make sure that you are not already crashed down on your caloric intake or a certain macronutrient intake, or that you are really, really low for most of the week and then really high on the weekends. So just having like a very steady intake that you've been able to be consistent with and show your body that it can like expect some level of homeostasis in terms of the nourishment that you're providing it. Very important. If you come in and you are under your baseline or your like your actual maintenance calories, then it's going to just be so much harder to go into this phase and actually have it be effective. Your body's already adapted to lower calories. It's going to adapt every time that you drop it, and you can only drop things so far without having very, very important detrimental health effects on that. So you want to make sure that you're at a good place for maintenance calories. And I just want to acknowledge how hard this is. It's hard to get up to maintenance for a lot of people. It's hard to trust that process. It's hard to see the shifts in the scale. A lot of times, whenever I'm bringing people up to maintenance, uh, that we'll see shifts in the scale, but it's because their muscles are gaining more fullness, and I believe it throws off the in-body scans too. Like even if they're scanning to see their body fat and their muscle mass, we'll start seeing muscle mass coming up at a rate that is honestly not really sensible for it to be coming up that fast because it takes so long for muscle to grow and be put on. But their body fat's coming down and their weight is going up a little bit, and it's just normal, especially depending on where their body composition was to begin with, or and where their muscle mass was to begin with. But as you're getting up to maintenance calories, that is something that you can expect, is that you may have some changes in the scale. It is hard to do. It is great to do with the support of a coach, not only so that you know that you are actually nailing your maintenance calories, because not every online calculator is going to be right for you, right? It's good to have a coach looking at your physique, looking at your activity levels, your level of muscle mass, and actually assessing what is the best fit for you, and then taking your feedback and your response, your body's response into account. But making sure that you actually are eating enough food to begin with, super important. Making sure that you are not training, particularly cardio, like crazy, or any kind of like high intensity interval training. That is going to be another big adaptation that your body is going to be used to. So say that you're running like even like 15 miles a day. So say I'm running like 3 miles 5 times a week. That is a pretty decent amount of cardio, especially depending on like the intensity that I'm getting after when I do it. And my body is going to be adapted to that. That's the whole point in like cardiovascular conditioning, and that's great. But whenever, and there's just different seasons for every like strength that we have, especially in this sport. Like bodybuilding is very seasonal. So one of the things about entering a contest prep, and this can apply to anybody who wants to kind of follow these bodybuilding principles, entering a fat loss phase, you would want to make sure that you have tapered down your cardio a reasonable amount. Good to still keep some in just for health purposes, but that's not going to be like your go-to modality of exercise right then, because it's going to be counterproductive whenever you do start to really push your body for fat loss, especially if you're trying to get to an extreme state of fat loss like you would for a competition prep. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so your steps, that's another big factor here. You want to make sure that if you're, sometimes people can't help this with their jobs, right? I work with nurses, and other people who are just have very, very active jobs, and it's really hard to have a lower step count. But you want to have a step count that is not, completely sedentary, because you don't really ever want that. Our bodies don't do well with that. But you don't want to have something that's like through the roof, like, oh, I'm going out to walk for an hour each night to make sure I'm getting 12,000 steps a day. That's not the best place to start a prep either. So just making sure that that adaptation is not in place. There are several others that, make sure that you're sleeping well, making sure that you've got your systems in place, that you're actually in a place where you can meal prep and this is sustainable. Because the last thing you want to do is to like throw a lot of effort and go through the feelings of hunger and, trying something that you want to succeed at and not being successful. So check out those previous episodes where I go more in depth in that. But for today, let's get a little bit more into what you can do about the hunger that we do expect typically comes with competition prep or a similar phase. So, uh, not every athlete has a miserable, starving, hungry time while they're on competition prep. I think that's worth stating. There's different factors that go in there. I would say probably 100% of the people that don't have a terrible, miserable time did set themselves up really well on the off season for it. Or there could be something going on to where they just have like a really incredibly low hunger signaling anyways. That may be not the best overall for their health and just other things going on there. But it doesn't have to be miserable is my point. I think that a lot of people don't start these phases or don't stick with them because we have such a fear of hunger. But hunger is really a normal thing. Like it's not something to be feared. It's just our body telling us that things are changing. And I think if we can reframe that in our minds and not have this like psychological reaction of like fear and, oh my gosh, I shouldn't feel this way and this is not okay. And, maybe triggering scarcity and other feelings like that whenever people do get into that state, that's going to change your experience a lot. So just knowing hunger is normal, it shows that like things are changing in your body, and that's what we're trying to do in this phase anyways. That's very important to start with. And then I'm just going to screen share this tool that I absolutely love. This is the hunger and fullness scale. Sorry if you're just listening and you can't see this, but it's a scale that goes 0 to 10, 0 being empty, 10 being extremely full, and then 5 right in the middle being neutral. So this comes from the intuitive eating world. It is actually from a book that I believe is called Intuitive Eating that was written by 2 registered dietitians. I love this. I love this tool. I think that staying attuned to your hunger signaling in a more objective way, and taking the emotions out of it, because a lot of times there are so many components to eating that are emotional, like loneliness, stress, things like that are actually driving our eating patterns. So having a way that you can look at your hunger more objectively is very important. And this also can just help us with just being more attuned to our hunger and embracing intuitive eating, because sometimes, especially as athletes, or even it actually doesn't matter who it is, because there's so many factors. Like we can just lose attunement to our eating so easily. So that may come from having a lot of highly palatable foods that trigger this big dopamine response. And those are like the pleasure centers of our brain are like hamburgers, pizza, cake, and yes, like great things. And then they start firing to look for more of those things because it's a dopamine source. But it's like the problem with that is it's not, true nourishment. Your body doesn't truly like need those things. It's just craving them. So if you can take the craving out of it and like kind of separate the objective hunger from the I just want this because I'm, craving that because if it's a little bit of like a food addiction kind of thing or an emotional thing, then that can be really, really helpful. So if you are in a phase to where your hunger is not already being triggered and driven up by an extreme diet or your training and things like that, then this tool becomes even more helpful, but it's hopefully helpful at any time. The idea here for moderating when to eat and when not to eat and getting back into attunement with those hunger signals is to try to start eating at like a 3 or a 4. So if you're watching and you can see on the screen, 3 is going to be physically hungry. Like you're just starting to feel that little bit of like stomach, like growling kind of thing. It's not to where you're like consumed by it at this point, but you're just starting to get to that point. And then a 4, is not marked, but it's a little bit closer to neutral. So it's like we're just like edging towards being truly hungry. but not quite there yet. This is a good zone to be in for making better decisions, for controlling how much we actually eat, for not doing it in an emotional state, right? Because it's not being done out of desperation. And then on the flip side of that, stopping our eating at a 6 or a 7. So you're just no longer hungry. You're not overly full. You're definitely not stuffed. So it's just that sweet spot for where you would want to start eating and stop eating. And I would say something that I think is helpful to accompany this is to set alarms. It is actually very easy to get out of sync with eating. Either that's out of attunement with your hunger signals, or it's just the reality of life. We're busy, we're working, we have people we're taking care of, we have things that we're doing, and it's just very easy to go for to where we start dropping into this, 1, which is a ravenous, or at least like a 2, overly hungry, or, maybe that, 0, empty, where I'm actually shaking because it's been too long since I've eaten, just because we get absorbed in other things and we aren't prioritizing this need. But it is a huge thing for keeping our body in homeostasis, keeping our blood sugar levels like nice and even. There's so much good that can come out of actually eating on a regular cadence. So setting alarms to at least check in, like, okay, am I physically hungry now? I'll do this whenever I catch myself getting out of sync with my meals or and having trouble with that. For about every 3 hours, I'm setting an alarm to tell me, okay, am I physically hungry? This is the time I should go and start either looking for something to eat or preparing something to eat, or just making sure that I'm like moving in that general direction, so shutting down what I'm working on, something like that. And then eating slowly enough and giving yourself time to process what you're eating, because our brains do respond very well to that, so that you are getting to that like 7 of like, I am no longer hungry, but I didn't just inhale this meal so fast that I'm overly stuffed or very full from it. So sweet spots again, 3 to 4 to start eating, 6 to 7 to stop eating. Really, really great tool for just getting a little bit more attuned to your hunger. And just know that, yes, in prep diet phases, it is normal that you're going to spend a little bit more time on the lower end of the scale, a little bit less time probably on the upper end of the scale. That's totally normal. But if you just can have a good sense of like what is normal for you and what these ranges are, I think it just helps give us a little bit more of a feeling of control in the situation. Okay, so I want to make sure I shared that. And likewise, the hunger and fullness scale is a good way to kind of pull the emotional factor out of eating as well. So I did want to mention Celeste Rainsturk, who is a licensed mental health counselor. She's the host of Confessions of a Bikini Pro, and she is the owner and like founder, does everything for Build More Than Just a Body. And her Celestial Fit is her website. She's contributed numerous resources, including a masterclass on self-sabotage. She's contributed to this podcast. So if you go back through our older episodes, there's an episode from her where we go into food relationship with her work as a licensed mental health counselor, and then specifically helping women or people who are in competition preps adhere to their goals, but improve their relationship with food. She is just a like wealth of knowledge and fantastic at what she does. So some of the additional resources that we have from her on this platform are the hunger and fullness scale that I just mentioned, food and mood chart, eating undistracted, intentions for refeeds, and the food relationship assessment. So if you are on the Physique Blueprint platform, make sure that you check those out. I think all of those are great resources. Even if you feel like you have a good relationship with food, prep is going to test that. So it might be good to go ahead and just navigate these resources, know where they are, maybe look for anything that you can work on before you are in the depths of prep, to start, just shoring up your foundation so that you can get through it a little bit easier and more fluidly with the extra resources. And then let's talk about some other things that people can do in prep. So to help you make sure that you are managing your hunger, fiber intake is a big factor here. You want to make sure if you're doing macros, if you're doing a meal plan, your coach should have this mapped out for you to make sure that you're getting enough fiber. But if you are doing, if it fits your macros approach to prep, which is totally fine, checking in on your fiber, because that can drop down sometimes and just get a little bit low. And then we have a little bit more fullness. So make sure that that is in place. Being cognizant of your food volume. This is one of the biggest things that needs to be switched up. I feel if your calories are going to get pretty low and into the trenches in prep, they call it poverty calories, I think. So whenever you're getting on poverty calories, you want to make sure that you're I would say avoid or try to minimize your intake of things like any kind of caloric beverage that you're taking in, drinking your protein, for example, that is something that's going to be like roughly 130, 120 calories, depending on your protein shake of choice. And that action of drinking your protein is going to be very, very different for how your body processes it and for how your body like processes the satiety and like the recognition of, hey, I actually got food in my system versus like sitting down and actually eating a chicken breast or eating some other protein source that you're going to chew and put on a plate and have that like actual moment of eating. So making sure that you're making those switches is really important. Honey is another thing. I have honey in the off season, improvement season, but would probably pull that in competition prep just because it is such a dense caloric source. Going from rice to rice cake, so it's puffed, it gives it like a little bit more volume to fill you up. Uh, Vegetables, making sure that you're just like getting in like vegetables and fruits, things that have the more volume to them. All of those, like anything that you can hack your diet to put in a little bit more volume is going to really help. And anything that you can swap out that is going to be processed as more like real food and satiate you a little bit more, it's going to be really, really important. So uh, that's volume eating. Meal timing can look a lot different. This can look so different for everybody. So some people will push back their first meal of the day as long as they can. So say they wake up at like 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. or something to do their cardio or fasted cardio, depending on what their coach has prescribed. And then they may start eating at like 10 a.m. because if they're not waking up starving, then great. Like let's enjoy that window of time where you're not hungry and let's try to condense your food into a shorter window and time block. So it just feels like you're eating more food over that time where you actually are a little bit more attuned to your hunger signals or you're feeling that hunger drive a little bit more. I think that's a great strategy. You would want to make sure that I mean, the only time I would advise against that would be if you're like lifting first thing in the morning. I do think you're gonna want to still time your nutrition around your lifts. So that could throw off that strategy a little bit. So it's all about finding what's going to work best for you. A lot of people will say to spread out your meals over the day and get up to like 6 meals. So you're eating all these small meals and like feel like you're eating more. What I have actually seen is sometimes when food gets so low, that's not helpful for athletes because then they never really feel like they're taking the edge off of the hunger, you know? So if you're condensing it, say from like 6 to like 4 or 3 meals, where it actually takes the edge off, and they don't feel hungry for a little bit, that may work a little bit better, and that may, complement the strategy of trying to block your food into a shorter time frame during the day. So it's playing with this, figuring out what works for you and what feels best. And then for food sources, it is good to, it really comes back to like before prep, is having different food sources that are like your go-tos in place so that you have some variability. And again, especially if you're not on a meal plan. And then know, like, especially if you're controlling your macros, fats are going to be the most satiating thing. So keeping your fats, I mean, keeping them high is kind of like ambitious because a lot of times they're not going to be high, even, depending on how, just a lot of times they're not going to be like super high, even in an improvement season. But especially for women, they need to be at a certain level, and that's going to vary per woman, like your body size and enhancements will have an effect on that. But you want to make sure that your fats are at a decent place because crashing fats, like going down to trace fats, even though I hear of it happening and I hear of it happening by like reputable coaching companies sometimes too, that is not a sustainable strategy. That is incredibly risky without sounding like an alarmist. Like it's very risky that your hormones rely on fats. So we need those to actually keep us healthy enough to manufacture hormones. And whenever your hormones go offline, everything is going to tank behind that. So, or leading up to that. So making sure that your fats are not going below a certain threshold, and a coach should help you with that. But if you're coaching yourself, then it's really good to make sure you're educated around like what is a sustainable, like what's a good number for you. Again, it varies for most people. I've heard some coaches say they don't go under 40. I've seen other coaches go down to 25. I've seen other coaches go down to like trace fats, so just like what you're getting from chicken breasts and stuff like that. So, or I've heard of other coaches do that. I haven't like personally experienced that. So, just depends on the philosophy, but keeping those at a decent level is really important. And then your protein is going to be the next highest satiation level or satiety level for a macronutrient resource. I have to double check that satiation is a word because that would be terrible if I keep saying that and it's not a word. I'll double check on that. But your protein levels, of course, very important. We want to make sure that we are maintaining muscle mass, and that is going to be, that's the main job of protein, is those building blocks, those amino acids. So making sure that you are maintaining that and staying in a good place, so not dropping your proteins down too low. And then carbs are where we really do have a lot more variability. This again goes back to off season. Like the higher you can get your carbs in the off season, the better, because that is going to be the quote unquote easiest lever to pull. I mean, we've all seen that those like the Atkins diet zone, the low carb diets, they do work for a period of time, right? So we know that we can drop down carbs and it's not going to kill you. It's not going to take your hormones offline. You're not going to have like a terrible muscle atrophy right away and really get a lot of effect out of that. So the higher they can be in the beginning, and the more they can come down, the better. Everybody functions a little bit differently. So I like to, this is what, especially in the mock prep, what we've been doing is like, as we're bringing down food, as we're bringing down food and bringing down food, checking in with the athletes. Okay, your hunger level is a 3 out of 5. Like, are you craving one more than the other, fats or carbs? And then kind of making the call on, do I want to bring them down on fats if they have the budget for it? Because obviously I have some hard lines there, or carbs, depending on what they're craving. And, most people will just be like, yeah, I'm just like a little bit more hungry overall. But if somebody is like just a little bit more prone to craving, like the rice and pasta and things like that, like let's keep them on that. That may be what their body is just functioning best on. So gives you a little bit of wiggle room there. And no, just for making sure that you're successful in your competition prep, unless your coach tells you otherwise. And if they do, I would have some follow-up questions. There are no free foods on prep.
Hey, babe, quick question. Have you fallen out of your routine, or are you training and just not seeing the results that you want? You probably don't need more effort or anything else on your plate. You just need a better strategy. Inside the Physique Blueprint, we use bodybuilding principles, goal specific training, and evidence based nutrition to help you build strength, curves, and confidence. If you're ready to train with intention, the link to join us is in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show.
Okay, and as we're wrapping up, just a couple other things I want to make sure I'm covering. One, there's no free foods during prep. Anything should and would be tracked, especially if you're on macros. So that's your vegetables, your sauces, your seasonings. Very important to track those because of your sodium levels, which will matter during peak week. We'll go more into that with the episode that's coming up with Sean, Coach Sean Van Horsen, who will be hopping back on to talk about peak week strategy in a couple weeks. And then sugar-free additives, like how much of this you're getting in. Even sugar-free gum has about 5 calories per stick or whatever, per piece of gum. And also matters because if something starts going awry, like you're having too many sugar-free additives, and it's easy to like just lose our damn minds in prep sometimes. And not that like having a lot of sugar-free gum is losing your mind, but possibly shitting yourself or like having diarrhea because you had so much sugar-free additives coming into your system and not being able to figure out why. Is totally those things happen. It's prep brain. Like we hear that phrase all the time. Like we just don't always make the best decisions in prep. And just logging everything. I even our fish oil, like it sounds crazy to log your supplements because I realize that that's like a standard, like it repeats, it repeats, it repeats. But if you're using the tools and you're very efficient in your tracking app of choice, and that should just be like a copy paste, copy paste, copy paste kind of thing. And you can even pair up the amount of like seasoning that you're doing with certain foods and try to keep that stable. And it at least gives you a baseline of where you are at for your sodium intake and a true caloric intake overall. So the more efficient you can be there, the better, and the more data that you have, if you're on macros, the better, right? Then you just know you're controlling all of the variables, which is really what matters for whenever you are getting into the depths of prep and really trying to get truly stage lean, which is a whole nother level beyond lifestyle lean. So those are important things. I mentioned earlier about not starting to eat as early in the day being a tactic on the, likewise going to bed earlier, definitely a legit tactic for people while they're trying to manage hunger. And you're also just very like tired in prep a lot of times. So that's pretty normal too. And no, if you do end up like binging and having, episodes like that, it's totally normal and just good to tell your coach. Like tell your coach, because the worst thing as a coach is whenever someone's eating off plan and they're doing all these things. And sometimes it's stuff that the athlete, like they don't realize how big of a deal it is. And that's not to be like shaming, like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal. You're really messing it up. It's just like, hey, we just need to get on the same page from like an understanding. And I need to not think that you're doing everything right and continue to like throw every tool I have at you and basically create a bigger like gap between what is like actually happening and what like should be happening and with your body, right? So if somebody's like having binge eating episodes and stuff like that, like that's gonna obviously throw off where their intake has been, and then your coach's response to try to keep you on track is going to be to push like more cardio, more food, and now they've just set you, or sorry, less food, more cardio. We've just both set ourselves up, coach and athlete, for an even bigger like disconnect of what actually needs to happen to help this athlete. And if you're having binge eating episodes, like that's not going to help you to throw more, intensity at that. A lot of times that may be a sign that you need a diet break, like you need a little bit of a refeed. Maybe we can tweak your macros a little bit. So being honest is just so important for this relationship. And I always want athletes to feel like they can be really honest and be supported and still be like kept on track with their goals. I think that is actually one of the biggest like beauties of working with somebody like Celeste. Of course, your coach would be helping you with like the nutrition and the training, but Celeste, even with helping with the mental side of it, she keeps athletes on track. Like people are working with her while they're prepping. It's not like a, hey, I'm having these emotional eating, binge eating, whatever kind of episodes, and it's necessarily a sign that you need to give up on this. Like you can keep like both things can be true. We can work on your relationship with food while like continuing to work towards your goals. Together it may need to be decided that like a variation of the plan is better, just for honesty and for your actual benefit. But yeah, it's definitely something to be honest about. And then I want to make sure people know that yes, hunger and prep like that, it's going to have a lot of the ripple effect from that can be like obviously just being a little bit more consumed with food, getting more into like food porn about just like looking at food on Instagram, looking at like all the cookie accounts on Instagram, things like that, to where like our brains are just like in the trenches during that time. So know that that's normal. I would love to hear directly from like Celeste or somebody like that, where they stand on this. I would say like if you start to do those kind of more like obsessive behaviors, it's not the best sign. And it might be good to like just look for something that can replace that. There's nothing wrong with like planning your meal and knowing what's going to be the next step after prep. But if you're getting to that obsessive state, just from a psychological standpoint, and then you get out of your prep, like how well are you set up to succeed now that you don't have that stage timeline and that stage deadline? Like that's when we start looking at reverses that go like horribly, horribly wrong, because we've been obsessing over food for the last 6 weeks, and it's going to take us like a while to get that out of our system. So either like recalibrating things or just looking for something else that you can like kind of focus your mental energy on, probably a good thing. I'd love to hear where Celeste stands on that, to be honest. And then also, of course, I've talked about like fatigue It's normal to be really flat in your check-in photos because you've been so hungry for so long and so depleted. So your muscles, instead of having that like full bubbly look that we want on stage, just kind of flatten out, and then we start filling you back up as we get closer to the actual show date. Also very normal. Sleep being impacted, also very normal. Waking up a lot. Yeah, it's whenever, and this is all for competition prep, right? Like whenever you are really getting below what is like normal and healthy and not and sustainable. And so those are all things to expect. Some irritability too, maybe some like cognitive, like brain fog things too. So all things to expect that are just kind of normal with prep. And there are like supplements that you can take to help with this. Of course, there's like a lot of other strategies that your coach can help. Can prescribe to help you along the way, but to some extent, it's just to be expected. Okay, so we talked about volume eating, we talked about timing, fiber intake, various sources, making sure that you're tracking everything, the hunger scale for both like actually like objectively analyzing your hunger and trying to help you know when to eat so that you're controlling and staying within those ranges, but also to take the emotional side out of it. Hopefully this was helpful. You do have more resources on the platform. Oh, and then just before I go, I want to make sure everybody does know the reality of, like what you're up against, especially if you're in an untested federation like the NPC here in the US. There are, of course, like peptides are circulating now, and that's something that's being leveraged for people to like help with their hunger signaling. We know that these can be incredibly effective. We've seen how well GLP-1s can work to quiet food noise for people, and GLP-1s are being implemented for preps. I know athletes on prep that are on GLP-1s now, which is like wild to me. It's just like the shit that we can do, I guess um it's it's definitely that's something that's going to be a really big advantage, for food noise and for hunger signaling while you're on a prep. And so just know that that is something that is out there, either for the awareness of that's what you're up against, or the awareness to get on a team that's going to align with that and be able to help you take that route to stage. And then there's been various other enhancements that can help with it. So it's just important to know that that stuff is out there. Definitely doable naturally for any federation. It's going to be hard depending on where you start at and depending on how low you have to go. We talked a little bit more in the last episode too about, how low you have to go in terms of body fat is going to be dependent on your muscle mass too. So that is largely for a lot, especially the divisions like bikini as a great example, tie-ins on the back of your legs to get those to actually pop out and show requires peeling the last little bits of body fat off. And it's so hard for most women to get body fat off of that part of our body. So it's like you're in the trenches to get there, and it's really, really, really challenging. And it'll be like one of the last things that dial in. But obviously, like the more muscle mass that you have underneath your skin and underneath the body fat, like pushing out, the less intense it's going to have to be, because you can just keep more of that body fat in place and you still have the shape and the physique that they're looking for per the criteria. So, all right, that's a lot on this subject. Hunger is a big thing in prep, but I hope, or in diet phases in general, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.